On the 18th of August 2015, The Economist released a report on the top 10 most livable cities. Sydney has recently dropped out of the top 10 over fear of terrorism. With the threat of an attack more likely, the question has to be asked: how and when should protective measures be considered in the planning and design stages of property development? Over a decade after the 9/11 attacks, New York continues to be identified as the most likely target of terrorism within the United States. Engineering security is to provide a forward-looking, informative reference for building owners, developers, architects, and engineers seeking to manage the terrorist threat. No single strategy or approach is suitable for protecting all buildings from all potential threats. Thus, the first step in devising an effective strategy for protective security. The risk tiering system in New York looks at three important factors on a building-specific risk assessment: threat, vulnerability, and impact. A building's threat rating is the sum of the scores of two sub-factors: threat profile and target attractiveness. A building's vulnerability rating is assessed by looking at three key factors. The first is adjacency, essentially looking at what buildings are located within the proximity. The second factor is accessibility, essentially looking at the movement of people within the building and potential threat from a vehicle. The third factor is structural performance. How will the building hold up from a blast? A building's impact rating is assessed by looking at three factors: occupancy and height, economic impact, and critical infrastructure proximity. New York City's unique risk environment is characterized by dense concentrations of people and buildings. Building design is a crucial part of protective security, particularly in densely populated urban environments where post-attack casualties may be greater. Chapter 3 of the Guidelines surveys the circumstances in which certain perimeter security measures, including the establishment of hard or soft perimeters, may be appropriate. The New York Police Department developed the Lower Manhattan Security Initiative in order to help ensure public safety and security to detect and deter potential terrorism. With a 5-tier threat advisory system introduced by the government, Sydney, Australia's most iconic city, must give thought to building and infrastructure in relation to terrorism. With relevance to Sydney, the main point to be learned from the engineering security guidelines are the need for an in-depth assessment prior to the design stage of development. The first step recommended for Sydney to implement in the process is to assess the risk environment and threat in regards to the makeup of the area. The second step is to carry out a risk assessment. Assess the threat, vulnerability and impact the building possesses. The third step is the risk tiering system. Is the risk limited, moderate or significant? Forecasts show the population of Sydney is surging faster than predicted, putting more pressure on densely populated areas, forcing developers and builders to build up. As Sydney's population is expected to increase to between 8 million to 8.9 million in 2061, the time to implement strategies around counter-terrorism and design is now. Each building faces a unique set of security concerns requiring developers, architects and engineers to devise specifically tailored security plans within the design stages. Steps for Sydney's developers to follow before the design stage. 1. Assess the risk environment. 2. Risk assessment. 3. Risk tiering system. 4. Tailor the design to the building. As the global threat of terrorism is at an all-time high, it is important to consider different outcomes. Listed are a few key points when considering action versus non-action.